Joining us on The Informer is Cathy Oddie. Cathy has been a regular contributor on the program for quite some time, talking about domestic violence and a host of other issues that affect so many people right around Australia. Cathy, welcome back to the program.
Hi George, how are you?
Not too bad at all. I'm very keen to speak to you about the campaign that's currently doing the rounds. It's called Let Us Speak. You know very much about it, but there may well be a whole host of people that either have not seen it, don't know what it's about, and are imploring us right now to say, explain, please explain. Who is the we that need to be allowed to speak?
Okay, so the Let Us Speak campaign is in regards to allowing victim survivors of sexual assault to be able to tell their lived experience without facing the risk of criminal prosecution. So what has led to this situation and why this campaign is now occurring is that the Judicial Proceeding Reports Act was changed in February, prohibiting victims from identifying themselves publicly if their attacker had been found guilty. Now, the new law applies retrospectively, meaning victims who have lawfully spoken out previously are now censored from speaking out publicly, and media outlets who defy the law can be also prosecuted and face fines up to $8,000. Victorian sexual assault survivors could be jailed for up to 4 months or face fines exceeding $3,000 for telling their stories using their real name. So clearly, that's not a sustainable situation that any person who has gone through this experience would want to be gagged, because that's effectively what it has been. And we've seen this in other states.
It's like you've been violated twice, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely, because ultimately, once you've gone through a court process in the criminal justice system and your perpetrator has been found guilty, you should be able to tell your story whenever and however you wish to tell it.
So why are we seeing this change in the law? Who are we supposed to be protecting here?
Okay, so in regards to this, these changes were the result of recommendations from the Open Courts Review. The reforms were intended to provide a clear pathway for victim survivors to tell their stories after proceedings conclude with a conviction. However, what we now know is that the unfortunate result of that has meant that there's now need for court authorisation to be able to actually speak out.
So hang on. You have. Does this mean that you have to go cap in hand to the court and seek a clearance in order to be able to speak about your case?
Yeah, so as the law stands at this point in time, the only way for victims to identify themselves and tell their stories is to obtain a court order, which is not only time consuming and the emotional burden and cost of that, but the financial cost would cost more than $10,000 in legal fees. So how that legislation came as a result, it was not intended to have that outcome. But through making a series of changes to fix another problem with the law, it's now meaning that thousands of survivors will not be able to tell their stories. They can't use their real names. They cannot provide any identifying features such as photos in publications such as memoirs and autobiographies unless they get a court order. However, as a result of the feedback that's been received from victim survivors in this space, that's what has driven this Let Us Speak campaign, which had its origins, first of all, in Tasmania and Northern Territory from the journalist Nina Funnell, where she very much looked at the gag laws that for similar purposes that existed in those states and drove with the victim survivors who had been gagged to have those that legislation change. And so we've got two states that had the laws, they've now changed, but in Victoria, we've done the reverse. We've actually brought it in, which just seems quite inconceivable, really.
I'm speechless. You're suggesting to me that this law that's come in has now created a whole series of unintended consequences. And again, we don't have a national attitude or campaign. It's every state for itself, is it?
Absolutely. So I completely agree with you there, George, that it does seem just ridiculous that it's a state-by-state legal issue that we have to resolve. I think when it comes to matters like this, there should be national legislation in place to deal with these types of issues. However, to give the government its credit, on Friday the 28th of August, the Attorney-General Jill Hennessy announced that the government is going to fast-track changes to the law to address these concerns. The changes will aim to streamline processes for victim survivors who wish to self-identify while maintaining proper oversight of rights and privacy of other victim survivors. And these changes will draw on 3 recommendations, which are 103 to 105, made by the Victorian Law Reform Commission in its recent report on contempt of court, which recommended a range of reforms to modernise and improve the JPR Act. So what has been happening recently, and what I've been a part of myself, is that the Attorney-General has asked that key stakeholders be consulted to inform these amendments and that the voices of victims of crime are heard. So the forum in which I was able to contribute to giving feedback regarding this is in my role as a victim representative on the Victims of Crime Consultative Committee, which is a committee that's run by the Department of Justice and Community Safety. So as well as the Victims of Crime Consultative Committee, I know that the Victim Survivor Advisory Council have been consulted. There's been roundtable consultations for other various victim survivor groups, and they're really wanting to ensure that this type of unintended consequence is something that will not happen again. And I guess that's in the role that I have in these advisory capacity, is I want to ensure that people aren't put through this unnecessary trauma, because as an advocate myself, I know how much it means to be able to speak out and tell your story, and how that's been really very much
appreciated.
Part of my healing. Yeah, well, it's appreciated by those who are yet to find their voice. But in my own healing and recovery, being able to tell my own story has helped me move forward. But by speaking my truth and what has happened, it's actually, I know every time I tell my story, I get people contacting me at saying that's now given them the courage to actually seek help and assistance. So if people who are going through this stuff can't see that people who have actually got to the other side of this and survived and actually can move forward in their lives and have that, it's actually doing the whole community a disservice.
Cathy Oddie, you are a champion, not only for all those victims. You've been remarkably brave. I remember the first time we talked about your story. Not only were you violated and a victim of abuse, but it happened twice in your life, 2 different instances, so you understand predatory behaviour very, very well. The fact that you gave us an opportunity to hear it, I remember saying at the time, I admired your bravery, your courage, and the conviction. You understood what it meant to be able to tell your story. And I could see the cathartic nature of this storytelling, because at the end of the day, I've watched you grow in front of the camera. I've also noticed that you stand up now with authority. You're a consultant. People are coming to you and seeking your assistance. That's tremendous. To think that there could possibly not be an opportunity to save someone else or to help a host of other people who've been seriously traumatised and impacted would be a travesty. And I keep saying to people, it's 2020. I know that COVID has disrupted all our lives, but we shouldn't be thinking about parochial, we should be thinking about national. And Lord knows, this campaign must succeed, needs to succeed, yes. And I'm glad you're right behind it. And I'm glad you're taking this opportunity again to speak to all those people who have no idea of what pain some people have been going through behind the scenes. It's been extraordinary, and I commend you yet again. I just wish we had access to that story again so we could not relive it, but to give those people who haven't had a chance to understand just what a state of being and pain you had to go through to arrive to where you are today. You've been an eye-opener, and I commend you each time we speak, and I congratulate you, and I hope that you get to do so much more for so many people, men and women around the country, who have really had an extraordinary pain that they've had to endure. Some of them haven't survived. We know that, haven't we?
Yeah.
A lot of stories.
Well, you just have to look at, for example, I recently moved back to my hometown of Ballarat, and if you look at the victims of clergy abuse here in Ballarat and the rate of suicide that has occurred as a direct result of the victims of the various pedophile priests that and it's absolutely devastating. And then to put to those victim survivors and those victim survivors' families that they can't actually speak out about the impacts that those behaviours had on them. It's being violated all over again, and the unintended impacts of putting through legislation like that without giving it the correct thought and before actually passing it through this is the sort of stuff that can have a really drastic impact on people's mental health. I know in the advocacy community how much this has caused so much distress to so many people. And I know this wasn't an intended consequence, but ultimately, I guess the message I have to governments when they're forming policy and legislation is please do these consultation processes thoroughly prior to passing it through rather than as an afterthought.
Look, that's the best possible advice, and coming from someone like you who understands it at every level, I just hope they're all listening. Cathy Oddie, as usual, once again, you've been a champion. Do not change. Keep fighting for everyone who is following your journey, and we wish you a very safe time in Ballarat. They tell me it gets very, very cold in the mornings and very, very cold at night. But in between, it's just perfect.
Well, yes, it is. Apart from when, like now, where I've got a broken leg where I can't leave the house. But
no. Well, we wish you a speedy recovery.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. It's been great as always to be able to have the opportunity to come and chat on The Informer.
Always. No worries. Thank you, Cathy. Cathy Oddie joining us to talk about a campaign that really does need to succeed.